Hello, everyone. It's me once again, yes, but I think this is the last time well, welcome a session. It's been amazing to have, and I would like to introduce the next speaker. He's spoken at previous events of us in the past, and it's been a success, and it's always a pleasure to have Oscar Segurado. He's the Chief Medical Officer for ASC Therapeutics. Oscar, thank you for being here, and you're going to be talking about the synchronization of medical affairs with clinical development, uh, pretty much. So please take it away, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's a great pleasure to participate in another of your events, which I know they are extremely successful. And also thank you to Rachel, who has been also helping me out. I would like to review with you something that is very close to my heart, and this is the relationship between medical affairs and clinical development stakeholders. That means anybody that is involved in these two functions. My name is Oscar Segurado. I'm Chief Medical Officer of ASC Therapeutics. This is a company focusing on gene therapy and gene editing using CRISPR technologies for Hemophilia A as our lead candidate, which recently achieved IND clearance from the FDA. And also we have another asset that goes in the direction of stem cells used for patients with acute graft-versus-host disease after bone marrow transplantation. But what the reason I feel so honored, by the way, to be able to give this presentation is because my career started in some way in academia. I was 10 years doing research, clinical research in clinical and university hospitals. And then I moved into oncology with Abbott, then AbbVie, Humira, and then I started moving into medical affairs, helping Humira practically being one of the top drugs in history in the pharmaceutical industry. And then I started to go back in time. I started to go back into clinical development, and even right now I'm also very involved in the scientific development of what we're doing. So I have this 360 kind of view of the connection between everything that the company does in the early stages of discovery and R&D, and then moving into medical affairs. Let's go into the next slide. So this is an outline. I will discuss these internal and external stakeholders in biopharmaceuticals, the purpose of internal interactions, especially in relation to clinical development, and the purpose of external reach, especially relevant to key opinion leaders, and then how both synchronize and is executed. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to give you a case study. And this is something that we are doing right now, and how this case study relates to the gene therapy in Hemophilia A, which I think is going to be very relevant for everyone, because this is the way I see the medical field and the industry moving forward in the future. I call it even medicine 2.0. And I think that that's going to be a very good example to see how these two types of stakeholders work together. Next slide. So let's kick it off with the first set of kind of overview, introduction about internal and external stakeholders. Next slide. For someone that has been working in medical affairs for many, many years, I would even say decades, I can tell you this is one of the most complex areas in the pharmaceutical industry. Here you have a number of keywords that are going to tell you, okay, this is everything really that happens in our pharmaceutical organization. But this is really all the areas where the medical affairs teams are involved. And they have a number of responsibilities that are more directly relevant to what they are doing in an everyday basis, but also is about collaboration with different other functions in the company. And that's why I have this here to ensure that you realize that putting all these together and organizing all these is something that is the first step for any medical affairs organization to ensure that we move forward in two major perspectives: the external facing activities and the internal facing activities. Next slide. So let's start with the purpose and focus of internal interactions in biopharma, in any company. And on everything that a company does, the first step is research and discovery. And it's not only the discovery of a new molecule or a new biologic or now a new gene or cell therapy, also pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, epidemiological aspects, data mining. All these happens in the very early stages of development. But if we are already even in the medical affairs role, this function should be aware of everything that is coming in the pipeline. And also, we're going to see later that not only the way these assets are moving through that pipeline, the way they are expected to behave over time. This is the so-called life cycle management. To the right, we have clinical development. Definitely, once an asset made it, is going to go into clinical development, is going to start with a dose-finding study, phase 1 or 2A, and then move into 2B, and then pivotal trials. Again, this space is very, very well managed by the clinical operations teams and by the clinical research organizations. All that is happening in the background, and it seems that the medical affairs team shouldn't be so involved, but it is. And by the way, I would like to, I'm realizing that we're speaking here to MSLs, and I want to say that every time I talk about medical affairs, I am implying that that's also a type of work that MSLs are doing, although they also have their own box, as you can see here. Now, all these aspects are extraordinarily relevant. The way medical affairs interacts with the clinical development team means that they're going to see what are the key aspects of this medicine and how it can be related not only to the early clinical development stages and then late development stages, but also post-marketing, which is the phase 4 trials, where medical affairs and MSLs are always extraordinarily involved. And understanding the endpoints, inclusion-exclusion criteria are going to be extraordinarily relevant for them. Now, there is another area that usually in big organizations, and I've been in those big organizations, is kind of not related indeed to medical affairs or even clinical development. That's a regulatory team. Unless it happens like me, that I'm going back in time and I'm working in a small biotech where even the regulatory team, for instance, reports to me. So I need now to be extraordinarily involved here. And once and it's not only regulatory, it's also compliance, understanding registries, medical information, standard responses. So everything that is also related to aspects that are customer or patient-facing or external stakeholders. Definitely becoming more and more important is HEOR and reimbursement, the aspects related to the commercial teams that are involved in bringing this drug to the market. And although I have here as a separate bucket, MSLs, field support, study support, all this is really encompassing into what medical affairs is doing. And once you have all this going, the real role of medical affairs is to ensure that they condense all the scientific input. They also understand the study monitoring. They use advisors and reviewers, and they start thinking about medical and clinical training. So at the end of the day, they're going to support all the stakeholders in the company internally with a different view of how the drug is going to be behaving over time. Next slide. Now, what's the purpose and focus of external reach in biopharma? I must say, here is the bulk of the activities that the medical affairs team is involved with. They're going to be working with academic and research MDs, either for sponsored and investigator studies or ad boards, educational grants. They are also going to work with practicing MDs, MD societies, actual patients through advocacy groups and direct to consumers, partners, which could be diagnostic companies, devices, everything related to business development and collaboration with other companies, and then definitely interacting with payers. When all this is put together, then medical affairs is going to put together reviews, white papers, sponsor studies, investigator-initiated studies, and health economics, outcome research type of studies. So at the end of the day, the key is that this organization, Medical Affairs, MSLs, is going to be responsible for communications and publications. Next slide. So here we have an example of the two types of studies that are run by companies. The industry-sponsored trials are usually those that incorporate a regulatory pathway. Again, either phase 1 to 3. Investigator-initiated trials can happen during the clinical development, but definitely is a phase 4 studies. And here you can see how there are certain parallels. You always have in the sponsor studies a project director, medical monitor, pharmacovigilance, investigation medicine, product responsible people, project manager, and so on, and a number of aspects. Even in an investigator-initiated trial where the company is not directly involved, there should also be a project director, a medical monitor, a project manager, a data management. Everything should be there condensed in a different way and letting the actual investigator run it. So this is a learning process. So this is a circle where there is a feedback loop between the studies that are produced and are taking place through clinical development and those that are developed through medical affairs. Next slide. Now, again, at the end of the day, there is a common ground. And this is a slide that practically transpires from the previous one. So we need all to educate patients. We need to ensure that there is a clear understanding through patient advocacy groups. In one example, National Hemophilia Foundation, which we are related to, considering day-long dress rehearsals on how trial would work. And ensuring that the patients are going to join and be engaged with this type of studies, especially the ones that we're going to be speaking about in a moment, which are related to hemophilia A gene therapy. We also need to educate clinical study sites, definitely focusing on principal investigator study team, leveraging social media for recruitment if necessary, ensuring that we have this new type of diversified and more decentralized clinical trials, and leveraging information technology tools, especially now where we have the COVID environment, where we need a high-touch, high-tech type of approach, where we still are in connection with study sites, patients, and the entire organizations running these clinical trials through an electronic means, but also ensuring that the patients, for instance, have access to methodologies or technologies that allow patient-reported outcomes. And definitely, at the end of the day, we have to take into account any type of new ways to assess outcomes. It can be wearables, patches, ingestibles, everything that is now coming into the field. And finally, extraordinarily important is ensure that we educate the clinical trial sponsors and CROs. That means a company culture transformation, because we are now more external facing. And again, I want to repeat, that's where the medical affairs teams have an advantage, because we are used to work with our face and our voices looking outside. So we work with CROs, we understand remote monitoring protocols, we understand also everything that is related to new technologies. Next slide, please. So altogether, then, as in any program management type of approach, I would clearly say that we need what I call SPEM, which is ensuring first that there is a very reliable strategic planning, is aligned, focused, innovative, transformative, that the team executes, managing by objectives, impact goals, engaging and coaching the members of the team, and definitely ensuring that there is a way to measure everything that is happening. Metrics like lead and lag measures, dashboard scorecards, and ensuring that there is accountability for each and every member involved in that. So this is kind of basic program management, but I am very keen on ensuring that everyone in the medical affairs function understands that this also applies to them, not only to groups like clinical operations. Everyone in medical affairs should also do this. Next slide. So let's now move into this case study. I'm going to really go very briefly in the second part of my presentation. Next slide. So we're talking here about hemophilia A. This is a disease that is a monogenic disease, is carried by women, but these men who really have this disease. Hemophilia is when there is a lack on one of the key clotting factors, factor 8, and the majority of the patients have this, are missing this factor 8, and this is hemophilia A. There is also hemophilia B, where the missing factor is factor 9. And interestingly, because these patients require immediately after the disease is diagnosed therapy, they start receiving replacement therapies. So they start receiving blood transfusions or other type of newly synthetic or so-called bridge type of monoclonal antibodies. And in many cases, many of these patients are going to develop inhibitory antibodies. So that's very important that we understand how these patients are going to respond to any kind of therapy, because even if we use gene therapy and we treat these patients in a way that they act as biofactories and they start producing these factor 8 on their own, they still may encounter these inhibitory antibodies. So it's very important that we use kind of a precision medicine approach to understand how each patient is going to respond to this type of therapies. We have altogether about 400,000 patients with hemophilia that could be benefit from gene therapies, and the majority of them are diagnosed with hemophilia A or B. Next slide. So I talked a moment ago about the importance of being external facing. And when I joined my company, ASC Therapeutics, about 2 years ago, and because of my background in medical affairs, the first thing I did was to look for the top experts in the two fields that we are working on hemophilia A, gene therapy, and cell therapy, allogeneic cell therapy for patients with graft versus host disease. And we started selecting these individuals that you see here one by one, speaking with all of them and creating then advisory boards. So we are bringing them in the very early stages of development. In our case, we're about to enter a phase 1/2 clinical trial for hemophilia A, and we are about to enter a phase 2b clinical trial for allogeneic cell therapy. So we have people like Rob Negreen, who is the guru in the United States, professor of hematology in Stanford University, and other members of other very renowned organizations. And we started working with him and all these other opinion leaders very early in disease, in our development, so that they were giving us already important clues on what is relevant in terms of inclusion, exclusion criteria, and endpoints, and also the type of dosing that we should be looking at. The second row is about experts in hemophilia A gene therapy. Professor Steve Pipe is, I would say, the guru also on the space. He leads the hemophilia B program for Unicure gene therapy, and also he's participating in other programs. And here are a number of other experts in the field, and at the bottom there are other experts in general in different types of gene therapies, especially Professor Gao and Professor Strauss, that confided in us to be able to conduct a study on maple syrup disease a very serious genetic disorder that requires also a lifelong therapy. Next slide. So we needed to explain through these opinion leaders and also directly to the clinical sites of the patients, what do we have? What is our product? What is our gene therapy? And we had to explain that we were using a harmless virus, which is AAV8, that we used a promoter, and we use a transgene. And to explain that, we use the Apollo 11 kind of example, because it has a rocket, which is the virus, the harmless virus. It includes a promoter, which is the capsule that is pushing the lunar module between the Earth and the Moon. Again, we're talking a few years ago for Apollo 11. And this is a very simple way for everyone to understand. We're using that, and patients also get it very quickly. They understand also, next slide, how we're infusing this combination of a viral capsid, transgene, and promoter, and it goes directly into the liver. And in the liver cell, it's also taken by the nucleus. And in the nucleus, you have this lunar module going around the chromosome, but not being integrated into it. That's a very, very important concept, because that means that we don't need to fear that there is going to be any problem over time in terms of an integration of the chromosome. In the next slide, you see another approach that we're using, and this is CRISPR. CRISPR gene editing means now the contrary. We are now inserting this lunar module, this transgene, into the chromosomes, so the corrective factor A transgene is now stably integrated into the genome. And this is most desirable for pediatric patients, because you cannot use in children the approach I mentioned a moment ago, because the liver cells practically have a very large turnover because the liver is growing, and you lose practically all the gene therapy advantages. So we have a high potency, efficacy, and safe type of approach with this CRISPR gene editing approach that has been already published by our team. Next slide. So altogether, when you see the complexity of everything that we are doing, we have also an aspect that I think is very relevant. And it comes in some way being related to my experience in the space of diagnostics, personalized medicine, and all types of biomarkers. I've been working in genomics, transcriptomics, epigenomics, proteomics, phosphoproteomics, metabolomics, and all that needs to be combined so that we are able to provide a safe and effective use for the therapeutic product. So that means first we use a single biomarker, then we use a signature, which means combining several of these types of omics data, and then we use either machine learning or artificial intelligence to generate a profile that is going to tell us how what patients should be approached with this gene therapy, or which patients are responding or not through monitoring. So with all of that, I would like to, next slide. Thank you so much for this opportunity to discuss our progress and these ideas on medical affairs and clinical development and several other functions in our organization, and the importance of working all together to ensure that we reach our goals. And with that, I'm happy if there is any questions or any aspects that could be relevant here.
Thank you so much, Oscar, for your presentation. I do have a question I hope is not too basic, so please excuse me, but what's the difference between machine learning and AI?
Machine learning is a very specific way of taking any type of data and learning over time. This is called also neural networks, so that you practically give instructions to these data that are collected, and you go through several iterations until you get a very concrete response. So you, in other ways, you know what you're looking for. You're teaching the system. artificial intelligence leaves more space to this big data approach. So you take many data, you practically throw them into these supercomputers, and they decide on their own what is noise and what is relevant data. So there is not such a human input except putting together the algorithm. That's what makes it relevant. So there is no doubt that we are moving as an entire field into a new way of assessing data. The amount of data that is collected into any clinical trial goes into the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of data points. There is no way we can use the old approach of going through our study reports and having a number of statisticians looking into that. That's over. We have to use a combination or one of both machine learning or artificial intelligence to ensure that we are able to generate the data. Obviously, there are things that still are clear, which is you met the endpoint or you didn't. That's very clear, and you have your OR, you have your way to identify the benefits of the drug. The same with safety. So you also want to ensure that the basic aspects of any clinical development program works. But this is what is changing. This is what I would say is happening right now. We're moving into precision medicine, and the only way to really be successful is using these two approaches.
Thank you. So could we say that in AI, the human hand does not intervene, just where you say like just to add the algorithm, but that's that. Then AI decides what's you said what's working, what doesn't.
So they're related. So you don't have AI without machine learning, and you don't have machine learning without AI. I was trying to be very simplistic here, but both go hand in hand. And in some way, AI, I would say, incorporates machine learning, but machine learning is part of AI. That's the way I would describe that. But in terms of what we are talking about here, precision medicine, biomarkers, I would say that the first step is machine learning. We need to tell the system how it works. We need to teach about the disease. We need to teach about the type of biomarkers and so on. And then once we get to a certain point, then we are going to use a more broader approach with artificial intelligence. What we means, indeed, as you just said, that is going to happen almost on its own. It's a little bit scary, I understand. We will still need to be around. Yes.
Thank you so much, Oscar, for your presentation and for your time. It's always a pleasure having you here. Another question from the audience was that we have audience from Latin America, and they say that in Latin America, the precision medicine and this type of thing is not up to speed, if you wish. So it takes a little time to catch up with these new techniques that are happening elsewhere in the world. So it's
so I think I know very well Latin America as a Spaniard. I've been responsible for Latin America for a number of years while I was working with Habitat V. And I can tell you other countries absolutely well developed, and I think they are doing already that. And it would be Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, obviously the top ones. So I'm very confident that they are not behind.
Fantastic. And thank you so much again, Oscar, for your time. And if you don't mind, I would like to do some closing remarks because this is the last session of the event, and having you here is just I would like to thank all the amazing speakers that gave not only their knowledge, but probably the most important thing, or one of the most important things we have right now, the time. And it's amazing the commitment level from every presenter, every panelist, every speaker that stepped up and provided useful information, provided tips, best practices, and all this craziness we call the hybrid way or the new way or the normal way. I don't even know which way we are right now, but it's the way we are. So thank you to all again the amazing speakers. Thank you, Open Health, Monocle, H1. Thank you to my colleagues at Momentum Event. It's our pleasure to have this event for you guys, and also thank you, attendees. Thank you, everyone who made this engaging, interactive. Um, it's been insanely. I'm super happy. Just everyone engaging and chatting and commenting and giving likes and hearts and everything. So, thank you for making this conference a personal item in your agendas. That's the end goal of it, and it feels so good to say it. And we do have a leaderboard situation, I think. Well, Anthony, you won, Anthony, by a landslide. So we'll be in touch with you. Andrea, second place, and then Manish, third place. I ended up number 38. Shame on you guys. I'm number 38. That should be number 100. But thank you all again. And we have a networking Zoom break right now that starts in a couple of minutes. So again, thank you all. Remember, this is on demand and you can watch all the sessions for the next 60 days. The speakers that have given the approval to share their slides, they're uploaded into each session as well. And thank you all. Please keep in touch. I am sending LinkedIn invites and connections to everyone in attendance. So please don't be surprised if you see me. I know Oscar runs one of the biggest MSL groups on LinkedIn. Actually, the biggest, right, Oscar?
One of the biggest. We're about to get to 20,000 members, Medical Affairs Network. So all MSLs or everyone interested in medical affairs is welcome, and I moderate that area.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for a fantastic experience. Hope you all enjoyed it. There's any feedback, anything you want to say, good, bad, ugly, please feel free to do so we can improve. And ciao. See you in Zoom.